feel like something bad is going to happen to me. I feel like something bad has happened. It hasn't reached me yet, but it's on its way. And it's getting closer. And I don't feel ready.
Lake Mungo is a horror film that came out in 2008 and is written and directed by Joel Anderson. So Lake Mungo is a $50 patron review that comes from Brandon Smith. Last time he requested White God. Before that he also requested Prisoners. I obviously have reviews for both of those films, so if you want to check those out, please do. Anyway, Lake Mungo was a film that I was actually really excited that Brandon Smith requested, because this is a film that I've heard for honestly a few years now, but never really pushed myself to watch it, considering that I have a watch list that is just going on for an infinite amount of time. But Lake Mungo is a film that I've heard pretty divided things about, and that was probably one of the strongest reasons as to why I was kind of drawn towards this film and really wanted to check it out. I'm not quite sure why, but I just get really excited to watch a film that people either hate or love. And now that I've watched Lake Mungo, I think I'm actually kind of in the middle, because this film to me was a bit of a mixed bag. There were aspects of this film that I thought were incredibly effective from a horror standpoint and just from a realism standpoint. And honestly, there was one moment in particular that I found truly terrifying, and I thought it was just brilliant execution. But then there were other aspects of this film that I thought kind of dragged it down a bit and made it quite difficult to fully appreciate and invest myself in. But first, let's go ahead and just start with the positives. I think that the acting in this film, from, again, a bunch of actors that are definitely not A-list, I'm pretty sure the vast majority of people who watch this film have no idea who these actors are. The acting is actually pretty impressive and convincing throughout the film. And the genre of this film is, of course, horror, but it's crafted in this mockumentary type style. And mockumentary is just basically mimicking what a documentary would look like. So that is a style of filmmaking that actors kind of have to embody in a slightly different way. And I think all of them did a pretty incredible job. There really weren't many moments in this film where I thought, someone was just phoning it in. Everything felt pretty authentic. And the first act of this film, to me, might just be the strongest act, because it feels incredibly authentic when it's trying to capture just what a family has to go through when they're grieving a horrible loss in the family. And I just thought that that was one of the more unsettling and kind of disturbing aspects of the film, because I thought it was able to establish and explore the kind of psychological effect and emotional effect that has on a family, because it demonstrates how a horrible tragedy like that can alter and change somebody psychologically. Like, you think you know somebody, and then something that tragic happens, and they change in a whole different way, and they show a side of them that you have never seen and did not expect. And I thought that that was demonstrated incredibly well. And it's really all the stuff that occurs before it dives into the more paranormal realm, I thought was honestly flawless. And it was the first act of this film where I thought, like, wow, this is going to be an excellent film that I'm just going to love from start to finish. And then we get the second act of this film, which in my opinion is probably the weakest act, because some of it just didn't work for me from a horror standpoint. And then also, I just feel like the story and the pace that is being told in just wasn't enough, and it just wasn't, they wasn't doing enough to really maintain my engagement. And like, in terms of the horror, the reason why I say some of it didn't work, because this is obviously a mockumentary style film that's trying to mimic the whole documentary style of filmmaking. And even though I really admire and appreciate that this film was tackling the style in a really subtle and not overdramatic way. I think that was a little bit of its downfall as well, because it kind of approaches it in a way where it's like, oh, we took this picture and look what we see really far in the background, and like in the background there'll be a figure. And for the most part, that stuff didn't quite work well for me, because to me that stuff only really works if it's real, because we have plenty of actual documentaries that have more authentic photos that are based on real stories that have this kind of content in it. And when I was watching this, I was like, why am I really wasting my time on something that's completely fictional when I can watch an actual documentary based on true events that have really unsettling pieces of evidence that will just be much more effective? And in that regard, it was kind of hard for me to really invest myself and to feel unsettled when it comes to these aspects of the film. And don't get me wrong, there are some attempts in the second act when it comes to like, oh, look what we found like on our footage, like on our camera that was rolling, and look at some of these pictures. I think there were some aspects in the second act that were quite compelling. And then we get the third act of this film, which I think is a pretty strong act, and it contains an incredibly terrifying moment just because of its execution and how it's directed, and just the imagery alone was quite unsettling. And even further than that, the kind of concept and theme they're trying to go for with the imagery and what's kind of revealed in the third act is kind of terrifying. And this is the point of the film where I was actually, wow, like it went from something that I didn't think I was gonna really enjoy that much to something that really brought this film up and really elevated it to a whole different level. And I was like, okay, like that was actually really well executed, and that was genuinely terrifying. But then we have a moment right after that scene where family members are basically just explaining the meaning of that. They're basically just saying, oh, I think, that image represents such and such, and that's probably a symbolic meaning for such and such, and I think that's the character trying to tell us this and that. And I'm just like, you guys had something beautiful, and then you kind of soiled it with that. It's like you made a really beautiful salad and then dressed it with diarrhea. And that was something that I found quite disappointing, because the film brought me up to a high and then immediately kind of dragged me down to a low. But I did think the final 5 minutes or so, where we have the mom character and another character that I won't spoil, kind of merging and having their own character resolutions, and how they crossed paths in a really unorthodox way. I thought that resolution and conclusion to their characters was portrayed in a really creative way that I thought was really substantive and quite unique, and also a tad bit unsettling. So in that regard, I thought that was pretty good. And overall, this film's theme and concept that eventually gets revealed, that kind of has to do with this unstoppable impending doom, I think was a really unsettling concept that I think by the end was executed pretty well through its imagery, until it kind of gets spoiled a bit by all the explaining. But the concept itself, I think, was pretty disturbing. But as I said, this film was a mixed bag for me, obviously, from the way I've been talking about it throughout this review. But, I mean, honestly, I'm glad I watched it, because now I can have my own grounded opinion on it. And also, it did deliver on something that I found to be truly quite terrifying. So, as someone who just loves the horror genre, I'm glad that this film at least delivered on something that is going to probably psychologically stay with me for quite some time. So I'm going to give Lake Mungo a 7 out of 10.
I feel like something bad has happened. It hasn't reached me yet, but it's on its way.
Even though I'm not super in love with this film, I do think that it's worth checking out and coming to a conclusion on your own about it, because it does have some pretty great things thrown in there that, I think people will appreciate. And also, I mean, there are plenty of people out there that really love this film from start to finish. So who knows, if you check it out, you might be one of those people that don't really agree with the criticisms that I have for it. And I mean, ultimately, I think that's a good thing because you thoroughly enjoyed a movie, especially a horror movie. But really, that's all I got to say about Lake Mungo. If you really enjoyed what I had to say about this film, please give it a thumbs up and share it amongst your friends. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to be updated on more film-related content.